Hello. Is this working? All right. Seems like it is. All right. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk shortly about team dynamics and some soft skill stuff. Um, I hope everyone has looked at that soft skill article. We're going to walk through it a little bit later. But first, I wanted to kind of start off with just a little bit of a preface about soft skills are super difficult for most people, and even for people who practice it constantly. It's a constant thing you have to work on, and it's also something that's incredibly important now. Well, it's always been incredibly important, but especially now when any job you're going to get is going to be in a team. The stuff you're going to be working on is likely going to be complex enough that you need a full team to work on them. You're going to be working with other people, whether it be other developers, designers, managers, all that sort of thing. But I think everyone knows this already. And one of the hard things about soft skills is we all have different operating systems in a way. It comes easier to some people, harder for some people. Um, and with the different personality types and that sort of thing, I can definitely notice it running the cohorts. You can definitely see people have different ways of seeing the world and ways of interacting with people. Some that are more optimal than others, or more advantageous, more conducive to good teamwork and getting things done and that sort of thing. But I think everyone, if you practice it as a skill, which I really think it is a skill, um, you can get better at it, and you'll see positive things happen. The better you get at soft skills, the better your life is, as far as I can tell. Um, so I guess we can go into maybe a short little story that a friend of mine told me. He is a manager at a company back in Canada for a large insurance company in Canada, and um, he works with developer teams in that company, and he's the one that he gets jobs and he can give them to people. And he was telling me about the story about these two developers that he can go to, and they're on different teams, and they're the lead developers, or forget how it worked out, but he would have the choice of giving these jobs to them. And I guess there was a fight over jobs. More people wanted the jobs, but he was saying that I always go to the same person, and I was kind of curious. So why do you do that? Why would you go to the same person? And he didn't really know. So I kind of asked him more and more questions about it, and it turned out he just he didn't get a good vibe from the one person. So you could imagine they have the same skill set, these two developers, and one's getting more opportunities just because he feels better around that person. And it seems kind of silly, but in my experience, I'm sure we've all experienced this to some degree. This is kind of how the world works in a lot of the time. And so I want to talk about this aspect of soft skills and the importance of it right now. So I think there's two important questions you can ask yourself to kind of get a better idea of soft skills and how to improve on them. So one of them I would say is, after any interaction you have with people, and you can do this more of a general, um, you know, or in specific interactions. So the question is, after an interaction with someone, did you make them feel good, bad, or neutral? And it just kind of seems like a silly question, and it is, but it's a pretty important one, I think. And if you continue to ask yourself this more often, you can start to get a sense of also your moods, how people are reacting to you. And maybe it might not be always obvious, but so if you ask that question, it's fairly easy to be able to think, okay, after that conversation, did they feel good, bad, or neutral? And obviously, you want to strive for good, or at the very least, neutral. But if people are feeling bad around you, they're not going to want to work with you. And that goes for any teams, but especially in these, and I see it constantly. This is maybe the 56th cohort we've run. And Yeah, that is a huge factor. A lot of the issues that I troubleshoot are issues around soft skills, whereas maybe someone's not active or um, there's some sort of issue. And when I actually go in to look into it, more often than not, the reason the person isn't active is that they just got a bad vibe from the other person, or the other person was super impatient and was demanding things from them, and just generally had some rougher soft skills, which can be improved for sure. But that's often what it is that it's just this kind of rusty. And I think this is good because that we're doing it in this context. These projects they're not going to make or break your career. Whereas a lot of people for developers they study, they learn, they do all of this, and then their first experience in teams and that sort of thing is when it really matters, when they actually get the job and they have to navigate this world. Whereas here, a big thing that people learn, especially in their first team experience, is just gaining an appreciation for how complex or important the team dynamic aspect and the soft skill aspect is. A lot of people kind of think that they'll just be plopped into a team and it's going to be perfect. Um, and that's rarely the case. I think teams have to be fostered. You have to foster a team and kind of build it together. As opposed to just expecting it to happen. And we'll get into that after. Expectations is a big thing. So that general question, we'll touch on this a little bit after, but asking that fundamental question after any interaction with someone, did I make them feel good, bad, or neutral? Just generally, do people feel good around me? Do people feel bad around me? Do people tend to feel neutral? That can help you a lot if you're thinking about that, and then you can augment how you are around other people after that. Another aspect I think is important to think about is another question is, what do you feel is more advantageous, to be right or to be effective? And often a lot of the issues I see with soft skills are people, we have this natural tendency, we want to be right about things. And often that can kind of get us into some trouble because we have as I said, we all have these different operating systems, different personalities. And when you feel like you need to be right, you're going to say things that aren't optimal for teams, that aren't advantageous for teams going together. And oftentimes the best way to be more effective is to just kind of ignore that ego stuff about being right. To give an example, let's say if someone's not active right away or within the first day or 2 days or 3 days, we might have a tendency to say like, you're not active, what's wrong with you? This sort of thing, get really upset. But you may be right in that case. Maybe the person, they weren't around, that sort of thing. We don't know, the personal situations. Often people have things, they're caught up, exams, whatever. But we may be right in that way, but it's not really that effective because that person, if they feel any bad vibes from you, if you're accusing them right off the bat, they're just simply not going to, they don't feel good around you. They're not going to want to work with you. They're less likely to be active. So that's another question to consider is, what is more important, to be effective or to be right? I think our natural tendencies, we want to be right. But if we can kind of ask that question continually, kind of get outside of ourselves a little bit, and especially when you're upset about something, it's a perfect time to get out a little bit and just say like, will it be effective if I try to be right in this way? And of course, there are often, there's different scenarios, different context is always important. But as a given rule or a general rule, I think it's always important to be asking these two questions. So that's kind of two questions that I say would define soft skills in a kind of a general way, but I think they really get at the core of the importance of what soft skills are and how they can be helpful. Next one is team momentum. And team momentum is super it's super connected to soft skills. I should also say, I can't see any messages in the chat, so I don't know what anyone is saying. I don't know why it's not showing up. Just try for a second, see. No, nothing's popping up. So I'm sorry if I don't see anything. I think after I'll go and see and look for questions. Um, so quickly for momentum. So what is momentum? Momentum is kind of a weird thing to think about with teams, but from my perspective, it is everything. As I mentioned before, I think we often go into teams, at least with this context, thinking that it's just going to be everyone's going to be all in. It's going to be perfect scenario. The team's going to be great, but it rarely is perfect in that way. You always need to, momentum in any team situation. Doesn't matter what company you're in. It could be a group of friends. Doesn't matter, any group of people. Momentum is something that doesn't just happen. It has to be fostered. And I would argue through soft skills, that's half of it to foster it. Half of it's already set up because we've organized people who are eager to learn, do these projects, and put them together. That's half of it. But getting people to kind of come together and utilize those soft skills in a way that activates the team, I guess, is a way to think about it. And the main thing for momentum is enthusiasm. That's why if you've read the onboarding material, I mention this a lot. Sometimes I pass cohorts. I'm not sure if I did it for this one. Literally showed a screenshot of like, do this, or say this, or copy and paste this, which is usually something like, let's say you just started in your team. I'm super excited to join, something with enthusiasm that kind of gets people excited about it. Because if you come in just sort of, hey, hi, not really that energy, people react to it, which is probably why you think I'm crazy with all the emojis I use. That's partly because of the global nature of these cohorts. In any given day, I might talk to, 20 to 80 people from 30 to 50 countries, and it's all these different languages. It's super important to have that kind of facial expressions. You can't have it in text, but you can, to a certain extent, emojis give that. And it's a great tool to just provide energy to the team using emojis and just bringing enthusiasm. So that's kind of how you establish momentum, essentially enthusiasm. Next is another assumption I think is commonly made. Once you get that rhythm in a team, that it will just last necessarily, which is definitely not the case. Keeping in mind, for working remotely, people live all around the world, different schedules. Most of the teams are part-time, so which means they often have jobs or all kinds of different situations. So keeping momentum is hugely important as well, and getting that momentum started at the very beginning helps a lot with that. And then continuous communication is essentially the antidote to keeping momentum going. And then always utilizing soft skills to a certain extent. Because you're going to have situations, it's going to be roadblocks, and you're going to have situations where you're conflict of some kind or confusion, and just maintain those soft skills, even amongst the moments when you're frustrated, goes a long way. And I guess a couple tips for momentum, and this we'll talk about this later as well. One would be, don't expect things from other people in that unnecessarily, I should say. So let's say you make an agreement, so-and-so is going to do a certain task by a certain date. That's an expectation that's okay because it's been agreed upon by both parties. And even then, I would say you want to be as flexible as you want or as you can be. But other situations, this is a problem I see a lot, is that people will expect things without the other person necessarily agreeing to it. And they're bringing their operating system and how they view the world. This should happen here. I expect this person to do that person. But if that person has no idea what to do, a common one will be setting up a certain part of the project. If everybody is thinking the other person is going to do it, no one does it. If anyone's been pair programming in the past week, you'll notice in the call to action message we send when we match people, I think the first one is say hi, and then it tells a little story about how I've matched people before and they don't say anything. And then when I ask them, each one individually, why didn't you guys talk? And they'll say, well, I was waiting for the other person to say hi. And then the other person says, I was waiting for that person to say hi. And this is where you see the issue of expectations, expecting someone else to do it. I would say in most life situations, but especially in these ones, a really useful tool is this idea of extreme ownership. I don't know if anyone is familiar with, I think his name is Jocko Willink, some kind of crazy US Navy person, but he has a really interesting idea of extreme ownership. And this is kind of a little bit stoic. Idea is essentially you just take extreme ownership over everything in your life. You don't blame other people, and almost to a fault. At least that way you're covered completely, and it's a great fail-safe for soft skills. Because that's a big issue, is if you expect other people to do things and you react to them, especially when they don't know you had that expectation or it wasn't mutually agreed upon, they get really annoyed and definitely get bad vibes around people that expect things unnecessarily or unfairly. Another one would be, I guess now would be a good time to go over some of the points in the article. Actually, let's wait for that. Let's continue to talk over. Okay, here's another one. So we talked about extreme ownership, and we've talked about expectations. Another important one to think about is always being considerate of the other person's ego. This is another idea by someone by the name of Ray Dalio. I'm not sure if you've heard of Ray Dalio. He's the founder of Bridgewater Associates, which is the biggest hedge fund in the history of humans. I think this guy is probably top 100 richest people in the world, but a very intelligent person. He wrote a book called Principles. It was published last year. Really, really good book, and essentially has the principles that they've used that company to get that company where it is. And one of the big ideas in that book is, I should also preface this by, this person's past 30 years has been focused on how to make teams work together, how to have organizations that work well together. And one of the things he found was that it's important to make this distinction between the two U's. We all have these sort of two U's. I definitely see this through the cohorts where people will apply, say anything to get in, just, and not saying anything bad about this. This is a natural. We all have this. I definitely have this. Anyone who's tried to sign up for a gym, you experience this. We all have the two U's. The one is the kind of more idealized person. So, if you say, do you think it's a good idea if you start eating healthy? The one side of you is always going to be like, yeah, of course it is. I should do that. I'm going to do that. But then there's an other side, more kind of like the lizard brain aspect of you that just won't do that. And this is an issue we deal with in the cohorts, where we kind of have to go on people's word often. If they're new, if we don't know anything, their past performance in teams and how reliable they were, we have to go try to take that leap of faith with people. And it's a constant battle. So I think being aware of these two differences, you've got the one side that's going to be more idealized, and you've got this other side that's going to be constantly kind of maybe not going for it, not doing the right things. Discipline is very difficult in that way. And just realizing that we all have that is really important, I think, because then it also cuts down on the, unnecessary expectations you might have for someone. And on related to that, I think a good thing to think about is there's nothing beneficial that comes from bringing something negative out of someone. So we have essentially these two sides, and also involved in that, we have two sides of ego. You can have a good side. If your ego comes out in a way you're getting praise, you feel good. You like that. It's good. You want to do more of that stuff. You want to be around people that make you feel better, or praise what you're working on. That's part of why the cohorts work so well, is that a lot of us will be in, I know my personal experience, I'm from a small town in Canada, and when I first started learning to program, I had no background in it at all. I did humanities, journalism, nothing doing with programming. no family member, no friends, nobody knew anything about programming. So when I was learning that, as we all know, it can be super difficult to go through that. You get in a coding challenge and you have no idea what to do, and you have no one to go to even to empathize with. It can be extremely difficult. So when you first kind of be around people, it'll be like, oh, I understand that. You keep working on that. You're doing great. It really can benefit you. And that's kind of your ego in a positive way coming out. Where I see a lot of issues in the cohorts is when people unnecessarily bring out someone's ego in a negative way. And I can't think of any way has any beneficial outcome by bringing someone's ego in a negative way. This is kind of where it comes into, do you want to be right or effective? Because sometimes you may be right or correct about something, but it just there's no benefit by making that point. It's not going to change anything, and it'll just make them resentful of you. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're in your team, is to be conscious. Always be afraid of bringing out someone's ego in a negative way. So that could be any kind of criticism of any kind that is unnecessary. I would say there definitely are contexts where you need constructive criticism. That's definitely important. But even then, you want to buffer that a little bit, being mindful that you can criticize someone in the wrong way, and then they're just going to shut off from you, and you won't be able to get anything done. You won't be effective. So I think that's important to think about as well. And I think now would be a good time we'll look at some of these principles on this article. So I think everyone can see this. Yeah. So number one on here, I should also preface this by these are essentially chapter titles on a book that's really good, that has a kind of a horrible name, but it essentially principles to be a good person. It's a handbook for soft skills. Number one is huge. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And I think this brings out the reason this is number one in a lot of what this is around is any criticism, condemnation, or complaint usually brings out someone's ego in a negative way. And once you do that, they're just not going to be helpful to you. To go back to that example with my friend at the insurance company, he couldn't really pinpoint it, what it was about the one developer, but he just didn't like him. He probably the way he was talking, some kind of small complaint. I think that was what it was. It was something like he would complain about how it was given to him and certain things like that. And they could be correct complaints. They could be legit complaints. But the way he went about it was he brought up the person's ego, and so that just shut him off. He didn't improve it. He just stopped giving projects to that person, which took away opportunities for that person. So I think that's number one. It's a huge one, and it definitely makes sense why it's number one. I should also preface this as well with, you might have seen me write this somewhere. Warren Buffett actually, he took a course on this, and he talks about how the certificate he got from that course is the only certificate in his office. Doesn't have his graduate degree or his bachelor degree in there. He just has a certificate essentially for these principles. And he just claims that it just completely changed his life. Because he didn't really have many soft skills before, he said, kind of a geeky guy. And then he learned some of these soft skills, and helped him in a lot of ways. So we talked about number one, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Again, remember, context is important. There are definitely times for constructive criticism, but I can't think of any way that without it being constructive, if just random criticizing of something, condemning or complaining about something, there's no real positive to it at all, and especially in a team context. It will ruin your teams if you do that. Another one would be, I'm trying to think of principles specific to the teams. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Definitely, that kind of can be difficult at times if you're. It also, depends on the personality. Some people like to argue, and if they can find two people that like doing that, that's usually something that happens when you build a relationship with someone. Then you have that kind of buffer where you have the good faith already established. The person's not meaning ill will by it. But until that's established, I would avoid all arguments. Try to find a way around them. Show respect for the other person's opinion. Never say you're wrong. Yeah, definitely. Then that brings out the ego. If you say you're wrong, that's just like an instant ego comes out. You can always put things in a different way. A lot of this is, as I said, this is super hard. A lot of this stuff is difficult to do, and it takes a lot of practice. The more people work with people, more you work with other people, the more you'll realize how important it is to develop these soft skills, and also the more practice you'll have with developing them. If you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. I think this is a great one. Even if you're not wrong, try to, you want that, people will be more sympathetic and want to help you and work with you if they feel that you're humble. And if you're humble, obviously be humble is the best approach. But as a specific tactic, admitting you're wrong definitely is a great way to get people to want to work with you. Another one, begin in a friendly way. Definitely, I would say maintain friendliness as much as you can. Even when people are bothering me with something, I try to maintain some semblance of being friendly, because it just takes away any issues, really. It makes it difficult for an argument to happen if you're maintaining friendliness. And this is definitely difficult, I know. It takes some skill to kind of be flexible in this way and not to react when you get upset. Another one, be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires. For sure, that's a huge one. And this is definitely going to come into play as people work on ideas for projects right now. People have different ideas, and navigating that is a challenge. But being sympathetic to people's ideas helps, and just being friendly with that. So this goes back to the complaints. You want to call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. No, there's going to be a lot of issues with GitHub, how you allocate tasks, people working on tasks. We're in prime spot for this kind of issues. We're going to be making mistakes constantly. And we're all going to be doing it. I think that's important to notice as well. Or we have made them before. That's what I like to say when people are preparing for the cohorts. Learn the basics of Git and GitHub, but understand you're going to make mistakes. It's going to be chaos at some point, but that's how it's kind of just, to a certain extent, you have to do that. You have to have merge conflicts at some point. I mean, ideally you wouldn't have them, but it's better here than in a different place when you're on the job and screwing up your company's code. So just, be careful around people's mistakes. We're all going to do them, so there's no need to freak out over them. This one is huge, 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 huge. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. This is one that I don't see it that often, but I notice it when it happens, because it usually causes an issue. People do not like to work with people who give orders, especially when you just met them. So if you're in a team and suddenly someone's saying, you do this, you do that, or why isn't this done? Why isn't that done? That is a big no-no as far as people don't like that. People don't want to work with people who do that. Now, keeping in mind, there definitely is a way, this is, I guess, the difference between leadership and not leadership. People do want people to take directions in the team, and you need to have someone to sort of take direction. But again, direct orders in the wrong context will just ruin that. And this one also really big one, especially where in our context, where people learning in the learning context, giving people a fine reputation to live up to is huge. You can really activate people in a way that they didn't even think they could. They could accomplish things they never imagined they could do. This is huge around people with the imposter syndrome as well. And in Jingu, this is kind of one of our principles, is we give people the opportunities that maybe they don't think they can do, or that, we just kind of throw people into it, and then you learn on the way, and then next thing you know, they're doing it. One of my favorite things for teams that don't work out is when someone takes the project and just finishes it on their own, and kind of goes through that, overcomes those challenges and perseveres. Almost every time they come out with this idea of like, wow, I can do this. I had never thought I could do that. And there's a whole different level of confidence. Um, and so even within your teams, you want to a certain extent, obviously you want to get to know the person's level and your teammates level, um, and work within those boundaries. But you definitely want to shoot for a little bit higher, give them that reputation, um, to live up to. And more often than not, they'll do it. And the opposite of that, if you give someone a negative reputation, they'll also more often than not live up to that. So this is one reason why with any issues, we like to put them in the ticket center, partly because I'll miss them. And you can see this is my world. I can miss conversations fairly quickly. So I need to have things in one place. Otherwise, I will lose my sanity and I won't see them. But another aspect is some people will talk about their teammates in public channels as if they wouldn't see that. And you give someone, if you say they're being inactive or they're being this, and they see that, they will be that times 10. This is one of those things you have to learn. That kind of comes with a lot of experience. Okay, so I think that's enough for that. We can go back to here and we will stop screen sharing. Okay, we're pretty much through everything I want to talk about. I think a couple random tips, and then I'll go and look at the chat and see what questions were being in there. Hopefully nothing blew up, as I can't see any messages. So some random tips for team specific in our context, use usernames. So that would be at their username. When you want to talk to them or you want a response from them, use that. Often people just don't know. If you go in your team chat and you say something, it may not notify them, or especially in a team context, if you say something open or general, like, what are we going to do? When are we going to meet? That it's not talking to anyone specific. So more often than not, no one will reply because they'll just assume, again, expectations. They'll expect someone else is going to talk. So I recommend being specific, talking, calling people out individually, being like, hey, at so-and-so, what do you think about this? Or at so-and-so, would you want to work on this? Or just using that to get their attention, because then they know specifically. It cuts out this idea of no one has to think about it. They know specifically, oh, they're talking to me, I should respond. That's a super common thing that just comes with experience of saying general open-ended questions to a group of people that you don't know. Often they're not guaranteed to respond. And there's some interesting psychological stuff or sociological stuff that you can get into with that. But I'll save that for another time. Another one, be patient. That's a big one, and this is one that gets into the operating systems. You want to. We all have different operating systems. Some people are naturally more patient than others. Some people are naturally very impatient. But I think these are the cases where you kind of learn these skills and recognize, okay, my natural tendencies will not give me as many opportunities if I continually do them. So impatience. I know it's tough, but that's one that will not be good for you in teams anywhere. So I would say be patient with people, and right after the impatience one is don't corner people. Don't make people lose face. I don't know how many people are aware of this concept of losing face. I used to live in Asia, and it is huge in Asia. It's a massive thing. Even it's built into the language. Just to a tiny little anecdote. The Korea Air is an airline, Korea's national airline. And in the 90s, they had a lot of issues, maybe late 80s, they had a lot of issues around some planes were crashing due to issues on board. So, for example, in one case, they ran out of gas. The plane just ran out of gas. And a lot of this was around they watched the black box and they would discover that a lot of it was around kind of the minute details of the not wanting to make someone lose face. So in certain cultures, it's huge. Generally, you don't want to make someone lose face. So the idea is calling someone out or embarrassing them in front of other people. That is making people lose face, and people don't like that. They will shut down if you do that. So on that example of the plane crash, they had a case where they had an assistant pilot notice that they were running out of gas, and then but he didn't want to make the lead pilot lose face, and just crashed essentially. Like kept trying to say it around it that we're running out of gas, but just didn't say it. So that's a case where you want to make someone lose face a little bit, but most of the time you don't, especially in team chats. If you're in a team chat or in a public chat or in public, these principles fit in real life as well, in person to person. You have an issue with someone, or you want to ask someone specific about something that maybe they didn't do or something. It's best to do that in an individual message, a direct message. Because if you put something out in the open, other people will see that, and that person will be very aware of it. And that's a quick way to bring up someone's ego. You don't want to corner people, pressure them. So to give you a more concrete example, let's say someone hasn't talked in the team chat for 3 days or 4 days or whatever it is, and just being like, hey, where are you, to that person, something like that, or just any way of calling them out in public. Big no-no, big no-no, big no-no. Don't do that. Don't corner people. Go an individual message. Try to bring it up there. Even if you're blunt in individual message, that's way better than being semi-blunt in a public channel, because we're very aware. We're social creatures. We're very aware of what other people think about us, especially in a public context. So this kind of is connected to the patients. I know it's difficult for people who are a little more impatient normally. You want things to happen right away, and definitely understand it completely. You're excited, you want things to happen, and it's not happening as quickly. But try to be more patient, and then find ways around it. Kind of finesse the situation. Message them individually. See what they're up to. See if something happened. Some of the best ways to assume the best, and that way they'll tell you. So if you give them a fine reputation to live up to, and they know they're being bad, they're more likely to come back to you and tell you what's going on. Whereas you come out and accusing them, they're not going to like that. And again, they'll shut down. They won't want to work with you if you do that. So they'll actually, you won't be effective, doing the opposite of what you want. One more thing about the being friendly and enthusiastic, I think was worthwhile to mention. I was recently listening to a podcast interview with the founder of edX, who I think he was a computer science professor at Stanford or somewhere like that. And he eventually founded edX, which is a MOOC, similar to Coursera and that sort of thing. And they've just been recently studying about the effectiveness of courses and around cost. So the interviewer asked him, what does it cost you to make a course? What's the typical price? And he said something like 10 to 50,000 is what a course costs to make. But he said, we've recently found through a study, I think the study was at Stanford, maybe it was in partnership with edX, I can't remember. But anyways, what they found in the study is that enthusiasm and passion towards things, this kind of energy transfer that happens when people are really enthusiastic and excited about things, that was the number one driver for engagement for courses. So you could have somebody in a closet, dark, horrible quality, but super engaged, super passionate, really into it, just bringing that energy and enthusiasm. That drove the most engagement they found through online courses, which is super interesting. And I think it applies to this because you can see it. You definitely can see it when teams come together. People that kind of come in like, oh, hey, not really bringing that energy or not coming in at all, versus someone who comes in just boom, sets it off the tone. I'm so excited to do this. Let's get going. Let's start. And follows up with people in direct messages if they don't reply with that same energy. It's infectious. People like that. People like to be around people that are excited about things, and you become more excited about it as well. And that is really important for anything that's difficult. And projects are difficult. Development projects are definitely difficult. Yeah, so I guess a quick tip: use emojis. Yeah, they're simple. They're like a hack for this energy. They just transmit energy, enthusiasm fairly easily. And in our case, when you have people with different languages, it's even more important. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Yeah, let's go back to the 2 questions, and then I'll go and look for questions from people. Number one, after every interaction you have with people, I mean, obviously not after everyone, but even thinking in generally, do people, after they interact with you, do they feel good, bad, or neutral? And you start to think about, why do they feel good? Why do they feel bad? Or why do they feel just neutral? You can try to think about ways that you can experiment to improve that. And then next one, there's kind of some people may not agree with this particular one. Would you rather be right or effective? Some people would rather be just right, and they're not, they don't care as much about being effective. I imagine that is not a very good life strategy, but necessarily. But there are definitely cases where that's more appropriate. Okay, so I'm going to go look and see how I can. Where would the chat be? Let's try this. Well, I can see myself in the past now. That's kind of weird. Oh, okay. Well, how many Chingu cohorts have you done? Definitely over 50. Hard to say. We did about, how many did we do? We used to do a different style of cohort. We did a cohort that was more, it was smaller, maybe 30 to 60 people in one cohort, and it was more general. So it wasn't necessarily just about projects at that point. It was just about creating an environment where people could be surrounded by other learners who had similar goals. And so we would do pair programming. We would set up some teams. We would have accountability buddies, just different things like that. And they were a lot smaller. And I think the last time we did them, we did 14 at one time. So it was kind of wild. There was maybe, I don't know, 700, 800 people. And then we moved to the voyages as we have them now, where it's more focused on projects. Although in this last voyage, we're kind of opening it up a little bit more, adding in pair programming and that sort of thing. And we're going to continue to look for different ways that we can get, there's a lot of people that will message me, say like, I want to be involved. I love it. I love the community. I want to be around it. But I don't have time to do a full project. And especially for some, we have a lot of tier 3 people who will finish projects and they want to be around. They can help. They're so beneficial to have around because they can bring that wisdom and help people with the questions they've been through. But anyways, I'll go look from now. Oh yeah, Darko remembers the older cohorts. It wasn't actually as much of a nightmare with the 700 people because tons of awesome people that helped facilitate them. Those I think we had around 30, 35 people that were running those cohorts completely. And yeah, I think maybe the most difficult thing was I was horrible at my job at supporting them, just because it was maybe a little too much for me to handle at that point without getting processes and kind of best practices in place. So I think that's why we switched for that at that moment. But we're starting to do that more. As you can see, we have facilitators again. And yeah, I want to continue to get that because it's great to get people more involved as well. Dante, considered launching goat teams. Yeah, definitely. I mean, to some extent we do. We have done them before, and they've kind of been interesting. They've definitely been interesting. Often time, you need to have everyone has amount of time. But ideally, that would be an idea we want to do at some point. Is when you get large enough, you get all of these different people who have vast skill sets. I should at some point. I've sent some people this doc. I'll send. Someone reminds me after. I'll post it. I have a document that has just. It's not even. I don't know, it's probably be half of the replies to what did you study, what's your past job, that sort of thing. It's just ridiculous to see where people come from, their backgrounds. Like any job you can imagine, it's probably on there. Anything from like a gambler from Argentina, a professional gambler from Argentina who codes on the side, to a doctor in America, to designers, teachers, almost anything you can imagine is in there. CTOs. Last cohort, we had a professor from Harvard or somebody who's teaching a coding course in Harvard. Like it's crazy, the diversity of not just the countries, but the discipline diversity. So that gets you into a completely different realm when you start thinking about activating people, putting people in teams, and then being able to tap those different skill sets. So, if you made a top, super skilled team, you put them together, they want to work on something, to actually build something to create value for other people. You would have a crazy amount of opportunity to tap these different disciplines, for information. An example I like to use is, let's say you wanted to make a product for a hospital. You could literally find doctors who understand code and who do code. They can give you insights into whether that product will fit, what they need at that hospital. You can get all these insights. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how do we facilitate that you can first get those teams, organize those teams, but then also kind of unlock the value that we all, collectively bring as far as crazy discipline diversity and background skill sets. But anyways, I don't want to go on huge tangents. I'm sorry. I'll just shoot up here a little bit. Can a team lead remove someone who's not active? Yes, to a certain extent, definitely. We make a ticket, and then we will go at it from there. Then we just sort of look at it, ask about it, because that will happen. You will have people, especially because this is free. To a certain extent, we've got a lot of little things in place. For example, a long application, different little filters that try to filter people who aren't that committed out. But at the end of the day, it is free, and that is a big issue we have, is that being free, people aren't putting that money in to keep that. There's not, if something doesn't go right away, or they have something in their life, it can be an issue. So we definitely will remove people who aren't active, and we try to move people around as much as possible after that. I think a good way, and this kind of goes into the extreme ownership and kind of having, managing expectations, kind of knowing that you kind of set success for yourself in a lot of these cases. I should post, if anyone knows P1XT, the famous P1XT guide, she's once said a quote that I use every so often in cohorts, and I'll probably post it after this talk or tomorrow, about specifically projects in Chingu. She talks, she's very inspirational and motivational with her writing. I won't try to butcher it, but it's essentially about, at the very least, you can complete the project by yourself. Let's say in the worst case scenario, all your teammates leave or go inactive. You have a project and you're surrounded by super friendly developers of all skill levels. So the worst case scenario, you can complete a project in that context, which is still awesome. So just sort of setting context for that. Okay, keep going down. Can you talk about what a team lead should do to organize and motivate team members? If I don't hear from someone 3 days. Yeah, okay, so the ticket, definitely a ticket. This is something, I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong answer to that, because we're dealing with people who are completely different and people react to different things in different ways. But I'd say the best way is, if they're not active in the team chat, message them individually and get a sense, and in a friendly way. If you come at them friendly in an individual message, they're more likely to reply. If you come in there a little aggressive, it lowers the percentage people are going to reply. It sounds silly, but I guess because I do this all the time, I'm kind of more. It's definitely real. You can be more effective if you're more friendly in that way. But if they don't reply then, which could happen, definitely make a ticket and we'll just remove them. I think what we're going to do is after about another 2 weeks, we'll kind of do a big run through of all the teams, see where everyone's at, because you'll be doing the first weekly check-in next week, or maybe even this week. We'll see. And we'll get a sense of where teams are at, how they're doing. We've got a bunch of tools that we use that gauge. It's almost like it's kind of signals. For example, if someone doesn't do their weekly check-in, it's a good signal that they're not that active. And, if they don't do their weekly check-in after 2 weeks, probably just deactivate them. We do things like that. Okay, I'll continue to make it down. And I should also say with that, definitely feel free to make mistakes. Team leads, part of the benefit is you're probably going to be a team lead for the first time. Usually people get their first experience being a project manager or team lead here when they join. We have a lot of resources you can use through the Trello. You can find the wikis, and there's even a project manager wiki that have a lot of information about that. And I'd say that soft skills one is probably the most important for a team lead aspect. But a lot of it's going to be just trying things, making mistakes, and figuring it out, learning as you go. So I wouldn't get too down on yourself either way. And always, if you ever need support, make a ticket or even message me directly if you want. I try to message everyone back, but sometimes I get a little overwhelmed and it might take me a couple days or a week, that sort of thing. But if you make a ticket, I definitely see it. I check that several times a day, and I'll be going through those all the time. And next, get the post link. Not sure what that is. Oh yeah, I don't mind yet. Yeah, some people do. Criticism's definitely good. I think to a certain, constructive criticism's good. The most important thing is how it's delivered. What's this one? We just picked pretty advanced. Okay, so all of my team members are in tier 2, but we just picked a pretty advanced full stack project. Do you think it's doable within the set timeline? Have you had a team like that before? We have had teams do that. Our safe answer is to not do that. The principle we use for that is to shoot for 25% above your skill level and a general skill level as a team. But it's one of the, I think, kind of the optimist in me always wants to say go for it, because I've seen teams do that sort of thing. But you want to be realistic as far as commitment. So if it's a full-time team and you get a sense that everyone is locked in, they're really solid, they're really solid as far as their commitment and that sort of thing, then maybe. But I think it's one of those things you kind of feel out. But the safe answer would be aim for 25% higher than the current skill level and not something crazy. Because we definitely, every cohort, there's people that finish and then they're like, damn, we didn't finish. That was way too hard. We bit off more than we could chew. And what if all teammates wanted to be a team leader? I think that's when someone steps up and to be a leader and says, you be the leader. These teams are small enough that it's not just going to be, there's no dictator mentality. At least it shouldn't be that way. A lot of the time we just say team lead, especially for the smaller teams like a Toucan team, which may be 2 people. You might not even need one, but you want someone who has ownership over the project. For when it gets tough, when people get kind of bogged down with time and you're not connecting as much, you want someone to kind of lead the charge to keep people together, and that sort of thing. And for a larger project, you need someone to figure out, okay, how do we do tasks? And a lot of it, even then, will be as a team. One of the more common things we see, which is a little bit interesting, a little bit strange in a way, that you'll have someone who's an experienced project manager that just doesn't want to be a project manager and they want to mentor someone else who's new. And that's great because then it gives people more experience who've never had it, and you get more people with those skill sets. So that's something to keep in mind. What if a tier 1 user would be able to do tier 2 work or understand their work? I'm not sure I completely understand the question. What if a tier 1 user? Well, let's say, like in a case where maybe 2 people were put as tier 1, but there could be a tier 2. That definitely is possible. We use a bunch of different factors when gauging the teams, but a lot of it is that one question we ask in the application: what tier do you feel you fit best in? I mean, that is one of the factors we use, and we definitely have a case where they'll be a full stack developer and they'll put tier 1 because they want to work on HTML and CSS, or maybe they're not good at HTML, CSS. And so you can have cases where you have people who can do back-end work in a toucan team, and that's fine. I think the best way to think about teams, and in all contexts, whether it be toucans, bears, or geckos, is you want to get a sense of where your team is at. What is your immediate context? What's your immediate environment? How can you adapt to that? I think that's the best skill you can learn from this, is adapting to different environments. And that was what I would say for that. What's your most proud project on Chingu? Oh, that's a good question. Most proud project. There's been many. There's been hundreds. What would be one of the more proud ones? There's one last court that kind of caught me off guard. I really liked. That in Sonam's team, they contacted a nonprofit, started working with a nonprofit, and started building for them. And I think they're still in contact and still working on that. And that was a Geckos team, tier 2, and they just made that effort, reached out to the nonprofit, and made that happen. Pretty proud of that. And that's just more being proud of or excited about, what people can accomplish. It's really great. And probably another one would be the Chingu X team and how that's kind of evolved and what they've been able to build. You might be familiar with the Chingu X team. It's kind of the team that works on a lot of the tools in Chingu, like the wizard tool you'll see. That was by the Chingu X team. And that's even had been a couple iterations. People from the last cohort remember it had a lot more to it in the last cohort. It had stand-ups built in and a scheduler. But we still had some bugs to figure out with that, and it cost more than we can afford to run it. So we've simplified it a lot for this one. But even the project roadmap that was done, I can remember there was a conversation it was like 6-hour meeting, and they just put it together, hammering it out. And this was all just to help people like yourselves through team projects. Super proud of that. Stop from there. How do I know what tier I'm in? That's a great question. So in your team chat, it will say an animal name, geckos, toucans, or bears. If anyone's wondering why animals, I grew up in the countryside in Canada. My mom has almost like a side hobby, rehabilitated injured animals. So I grew up with like baby raccoons and skunks, all kinds of animals around, bottle feeding them until they were able to kind of live in the wild. So I've got an affinity to animals. So I thought, why not call it tiers? Just give it an animal name. So short form, it's in your team channel. It'll say the team. Also, some of you, I think I've only got a quarter of the Bears teams done for the GitHub. You'll see it in your GitHub link as well. Also, news on that. I just got an email from GitHub about that. They agreed to lift the invitation limit for us because we broke the invitation limit within about 11 teams. So they've opened that. We can completely get everyone in. So everybody should be in by tomorrow. I'm going to wake up, I think, around 6 a.m. and just get that done. Soreg's in the mix now. First time seeing it. Yeah, it's probably the first time most people have here, I guess. What would one skill you learned from Chingu that has helped you see in the real professional world? I would say a lot of what we talked about here today, the soft skills, have been huge in every aspect of my life. Really, I've had to learn these soft skills a lot through trial and error, a lot through practice. I mean, those principles that I've listed in that article for a solid like 3 or 4 months, I would just read those over at coffee every morning just to kind of let it sink in. Because it's definitely hard, especially for those moments when you get angry or someone brings out the ego in you and you kind of get upset. To just be able to step back and be realize if I get mad or do something to bring their ego out, it's not going to be effective. And that you can apply to any aspect in your life. And I've applied it to every aspect of your life. I have my life. Um, Although my girlfriend might disagree at some points, but we'll leave that there. Okay, so I think that's is that all the questions? All right. Well, I thank you for listening, and I apologize for droning on for way too long. All right. So I guess we'll stop here. All right. Ciao. If you have any questions, remember you can make a ticket or definitely feel free to reach out to me in a DM as well if you need to. Just in public channels, I might miss it. Okay. Ciao.